Hi everybody, my name is Jeremy Siskind. I'm the author of Playing Solo Jazz Piano, and I'm the author of the Jazz Piano Fundamental Series. Grab these books, jeremysiskind.com or amazon.com or wherever fine books are sold. Now today I have something kind of special for you. I did a presentation recently at the Rubato International Piano Competition, and I was honored that I had like 4 or 5 of the students there ask me, can I get this presentation? Where can I hear this again? And so I figured I will record it for YouTube. I will be able to send it to those competitors, and I think many of you will be interested in what I have to say. Now, at first glance, this might not appear interesting. So the presentation is called Starting from the Core, the Abby Whiteside, Sophia Rosoff Philosophy of Piano Playing. And it might not sound interesting because you probably never heard of Abby Whiteside or Sophia Rosoff. But you might be interested to know that between the two of them, Abby Whiteside lived from about 1880 to 1956, I think, and Sophia Rosoff just passed away about 10 years ago, more like 5 years ago. They taught a number of really important pianists, including, firstly, me. I was a student of Sophia Rosoff, but you might recognize some other people here. We've got Barry Harris, Fred Hersch, Ethan Iverson. This is Rand Blake, the longtime kind of head of jazz studies at New England Conservatory. And on the classical side, Byron Janis, Morton Gould, Vivian Fine, some great composers as well as great pianists. And so particularly as jazz pianists, I mean, if you don't love Barry Harris and Fred Hersch, I don't know why you're in this business. They have a lot of interesting things to say and a really different philosophy of piano learning and teaching. And let's just back up for a second. So just to review who we're talking about, Abby Whiteside is the older teacher, and she wrote a number of books. Sophia Rosoff was her student, who she's the one who actually taught the jazz pianists, and Sophia was an editor of Abby's books and formed the Abby Whiteside Foundation, which presents a lot of concerts and does good work. So those are the two people that we're talking about here. And the whole journey for Abby Whiteside, she was a really highly, excellently trained pianist, and became a teacher in New York City. And she noticed that her students were either playing the notes on the page, right? She could teach students to play the notes on the page. You know, that's not necessarily rocket science. It's not always easy. Or they were playing what she would say is the music. And I actually have a quote that I can pull up here where she says this. She says, "The pupils in my studio played or didn't play, and that was that. The talented ones progressed, the others didn't, and I could do nothing about it," right? So either the students were playing the notes, and they could play better and better, more and more interesting pieces, or they were actually engaging with the music and were able to play more and more better and better pieces. And so Abby Whiteside set off to solve this problem of these two parallel lines. How could we get people from the bottom line, where they're just playing the notes, into this top space where they're actually playing some music? Sophia, her pupil and my teacher, said this: "You'll never get to the core if you start at the periphery." Okay, and we're going to really spend some time investigating what this means and what we can do about it. Okay, so just from a fundamental standpoint, it means that if you start at this outside of the circle, it's very hard to get from there all the way in. And so the Abby Whiteside Sophia Rosoff School of Piano Teaching says that we need to start with the core of the music and then work our way to those extremities. So what are at the core, the center, and what's at the periphery? In the center, we would say there's 2 things, principally. The aural image, being able to imagine in your inner ear how that piece sounds, also known as audiation to you Gordon music learners, and the emotional rhythm. And this is a key term that is really central to the Whiteside-Rosoff approach. What's on the periphery? So remember, Abby Whiteside said they can either play the music or the notes. And so what's on the periphery, first of all, is the notes themselves. I know that's kind of a scary thing to consider, but we're going to get into that. But then all the things that you have to get correct when playing a piece of music. The correct dynamics, the correct articulation, all those musical details. Now, just notice what we're not saying here is that you don't want the right notes, that they're not important, that you don't want the correct dynamics, that you don't want the correct articulation. These things are important and essential to a good performance, right? But the argument is that we want to start on the left side here with the oral image and the emotional rhythm, and then work our way outwards instead of the reverse, which I think is how we traditionally think about piano teaching and learning. Okay, so let's take the example of an actor. I just put this photo in there to remind myself to think about an actor, right? One actor could start by learning each and every word, each and every comma, each and every punctuation symbol of the script, and then start thinking about, what is my character trying to say? You could kind of even imagine that somebody who doesn't speak the language could memorize a script without having any knowledge of what the meaning was, right? On the flip side, we can have an actor who starts by really reading the whole story, understanding the emotional context, feeling that, relating to that, and then, after they get kind of a sketch of what they're going to say, figuring out, okay, here's the exact words, and I can understand why. Both actors would get to all of the correct words in the correct order, but they're just starting from different places. I promise you I'm going to get into very practical ways to apply these concepts soon, but we have a couple more things to talk about. Emotional rhythm is probably the term most associated with this school of piano playing. And so what is emotional rhythm? Here's something that Abby Whiteside says. By letting the rhythm be the guide, our attention is liberated from an excessive preoccupation with the minute details of the music. By letting the rhythm be the guide, our attention is liberated from an excessive preoccupation with the minute details of the music. So why are we saying emotional rhythm rather than just rhythm? Well, I love this little guy. So rhythm has the feeling of a march, right? If we're thinking about metronomic rhythm, here's quarter notes, here's eighth notes, here's triplets. We're kind of saying, here's these boxes, and we're going to place rhythm in these boxes. And obviously, when you're marching, you get from place to place. But think about how grueling that is physically to really kind of step into each and every step so forcefully. Okay. Versus ice skating. Ice skating, you're still stepping every beat, right? But you're doing it with momentum, you're doing it with gravity, you're moving with your body, right? Instead of maybe working against it to really ground yourself into the earth. I think this is a really good image of what we mean by metronomic rhythm, like the march, versus emotional rhythm. Emotional rhythm is working with the music and with your body to create something. Now, when you're ice skating, probably each of your skates is going to be about the same, but occasionally maybe you're turning, maybe you're slowing down, speeding up, and each of your steps, I don't know if we want to call them steps, is going to be a little bit longer. And as long as you're working with the momentum, you're not going to fall over, right? If you're working kind of against the momentum somehow, you're not. And so emotional rhythm doesn't have to be completely precise, but it does have to have this kind of flow with the music. Let's see, so Sophia says this. Emotional rhythm is saying something that makes you feel something, that really makes you feel something. Metronomic rhythm is too straight. Music is not straight. Speech is not straight. It's curved, right? Another metaphor that we could make is with speech. If I were trying to speak my words in the exact same rhythm, they would actually have less meaning. Versus there's a certain roundness, there's a certain momentum, there's a certain accentuation that we feel as we're speaking. And we want music to communicate like that. We want music to communicate like speech. Okay, here's where we get into some more practical stuff. How can you actually, shift this mindset from starting with the periphery, if you buy this idea that the correct notes are on the periphery, and the oral image and emotional rhythm are at the core. I'm starting with outlining. If you only take one thing away from this video, this little fancy PowerPoint presentation, make it outlining. Outlining is really kind of a deep musical practice, so I want to introduce you to it. So here's the first few measures of a Bach prelude, and I will first of all ask you to pardon my playing. I'm not exactly well practiced, but play piece. Now, most people, when they learn it, they're going to learn it kind of from left to right. We're going to learn the first note, then the second note, then the third note, then the fourth note. That's kind of normal, right? We want to learn music like we read. When we outline, instead of moving from left to right, we're going to move kind of from the outside in. We're going to figure out what are the most important parts in the music, and then we're going to fill in between them. This is like, outlining if you're going to write a paper. You're going to figure out what are my main points, and then what kind of details can I put subservient to each main point. So here for the outline, and we're going to discuss how you decide this kind of thing. Here for the outline, I'm taking 2 notes per measure. So it's 12/8, so these are technically dotted half notes. And as I practice, I'm going to start practicing this outline on the bottom rather than all these messy little dots on the top. So let me do that one more time. Feels nice. And you can certainly see and hear that there's a logic that you might not have necessarily noticed at the outset, right? That we're moving down by step for quite a while in each hand. So that's really revealing about the music, actually. So what do we do with an outline? I've got some really fancy animation here. So when we come up with the outline, we want to play it like a performance. Sophia would often say in our lessons, pretend like you're on the stage of Carnegie Hall, and this is all you have to play. You have to make it as beautiful as you possibly can, okay? You're going to make the most direct motion between the notes. So just like we're talking about musical core and periphery, in our body, we have a core and periphery. And there's actually kind of this great correlation between what we want to play using our core versus what we want to play using our extremities. So let's just pause on that thought for a second. Okay, so our core of our body is going to be kind of our torso down to our butt, right? And we can actually do quite a lot at the piano, and I'm going to change angle here. Let's see. I'm going to change angle a little bit without really moving my fingers, my hands, my wrist, my elbow at all. Just by moving my torso from my butt, I could essentially make a beautiful connection between these notes. And so as I'm outlining, I want to use those bigger muscles, right? We think about what's at the core. It's going to be our back, our torso, our butt. And then, for slightly more active motions, we're going to have to use our elbow. We call this flexion and extension. So flexion, extension. Of course, rotation is a part of what we do at the piano. Our wrist is going to be coming up and down appropriately. And only when we start getting to those musical details do we really want to engage the fingers a lot in this school of piano playing. Russians would completely disagree. But the fingers are kind of the finishing touch in a certain way as we make our way through this process of outlining. So when I'm talking about the most direct motion, I'm not talking about da, 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 da. I'm talking about da, 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 right? Really moving as much as possible from the core of your body. All right. And then lastly, in terms of listening, we don't want to listen for the notes that are missing, right? Because that's not actually going to teach us anything new. We're just going to keep hearing ba da 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 da. So I don't want to sit there thinking ba da 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 do de do do de da da do do. I want to listen for the outline as its own entity. Is to actually to teach our ear something new, to teach our ear something about the emotional rhythm of a piece that isn't necessarily tied to the notes. It's a tricky thing to think about, but you can see what we're getting at here, starting with these big motions and then filling in between. Okay, so we already talked about this a little bit. I'm not going to go over each and every muscle because I don't understand it myself, but we do know that pianists who play in a healthy way use a variety of levers to play. They're not just playing with fingers, they're not just playing with their arm, they're not just playing with their elbow. Depending on the musical situation, they're kind of changing the proportion of what's needed. And one of the great things about practicing this outline and practicing these Whiteside Rosoff activities is that you're going to train your body to use some different levers if you think that you're somebody overly reliant on one kind of motion. One thing that Sophia was fond of saying is that playing piano with your fingers is like the tail wagging the dog. Okay, sure, the fingers are important, but they're just the tail. Okay, we got a whole dog back here that needs to do the wagging. I think maybe, this is a fun metaphor, but maybe a more effective metaphor is it's like running with your feet, right? Obviously, the feet are the ones that have to touch the ground, the sidewalk, the street, whatever, as you're running. But, of course, they're not the thing doing the hard work. It's your legs, I guess, your torso, your arms are involved in running, right? It's going to be all of those different parts of your body. Okay, so playing the piano needs to be a whole body experience. I have seen so many students lately, this is just an aside, but it's definitely related. I've seen so many students lately crossing their legs, kind of having one leg off to the side and playing. And playing the piano is a physical activity, ladies and gentlemen. So do make sure that you're using not only the top of your body, but also activating your legs. Everything is necessary with this instrument. Okay, back to this example of this box. So I've done this outline of the red circles. What am I going to do next? I'm probably going to fill in the notes right in between so that I get every dotted quarter. Now, it's important to recognize that there's not a correct outline for any given piece. The outline is going to relate to your interpretation. So I might come up with an outline that starts with every dotted half note. You might come up with an outline that starts with every dotted quarter note or every dotted whole note. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you're right or wrong, but it means that your interpretation is going to be different than mine because you're kind of putting your fence posts up at different places. And the steps, the second step that you take when outlining, that can be up for debate. And I think a really good question to ask is, at this point, do we want to still listen for that original outline? Even as we fill in these notes in between? Or do we want to now listen for the outline as it is? And I would say experiment. I don't have a correct or incorrect. I'm not sure that this is that kind of activity. What you're trying to do is get to know the music from a wide variety of different vantage points. And so I think doing a variety of types of listening is going to be really effective. So I'm punting on that question. I think, again, it's going to have to do with your interpretation. Then what we're going to start doing, now that we have a sense of the oral image of how does this piece flow in a phrase-wise way, now that we have a sense of the emotional rhythm, how are we ice skating through this piece, now we can start filling in some of the details. And what we like to do is just one beat at a time. So here you can see these white boxes on the fourth beat of every measure. And so now I'm going to include all of the notes in those white boxes. Some wrong notes, but I hope you excuse me. It's kind of hard to see. Sophia would always call this tucking in the beats. And I think that word is very evocative because it's not now doing something new. Now we're just trying to insert those without disrupting anything. Okay? It's like they were there all along. So from there, I would go in and I would fill in the last 2 beats. Sorry for the wrong notes again. And here I would make sure that I kind of call my ear back as well as my emotions to that original outline. You can always go back to the original outline and get it really deeply in your ear. So that as you fill in these beats, you're not losing that emotional rhythm. So this is going to be a process that you have to practice, but notice what you're practicing here is actually not necessarily playing the correct notes, although we want to do that, but it's getting your ear aligned with the way that you want to hear the music. I think it's useful to think about phrase-wise thinking as opposed to note-wise thinking. Okay? In music, we almost always want to have phrase-wise thinking. We want to have a gesture for a phrase. Right? Just like when we talk, we don't want to have every word be a different journey. We want to be talking in these complete thoughts if we're native speakers. So what we're training our ears and our bodies to do is to engage in this phrase-wise thinking rather than note-wise thinking. So that was a Baroque example. Let me give you another example. This is my favorite Chopin etude to warm up with, his etude in 6. I'm sorry to anybody who really plays classical piano. So very difficult piece, seems intimidating to do an outline for something like this. But again, we could start with 2 chords per measure, and this kind of reveals a lot about the music. Let's hear what this sounds like. It's kind of nice, right? It's like 5, 1, and then slightly higher 5. And then I love this tension. And so now if we break that into 2, really interesting, right? One more time. So what's fun about this is that, if I'm learning it from left to right, I'm going to be just hanging out at a really slow tempo for a really long time, right? I mean, this is a hard piece. But as I play the outline, I'm actually engaging with the music, the mood, the way the music wants to flow from the very beginning. And in fact, I know this is going to sound crazy, but Sophia always recommended practicing a piece at tempo from the very first day you practice that piece. Now, you're going to leave out a lot of information as you do that. And you're going to have to go back. You're going to have to do slow practice. We're not crazy. You're going to have to then go back and do slow practice. But some of your practice, at least, should be trying to capture that flow, that ice skating feeling of how is this piece going to actually work when it's together. So that we're not waiting until we know every single note to get to the music, right? When you think about that, that's kind of crazy. I'm going to figure out every single note, and then I'm going to try to make music out of it. No, we're reversing that. We're starting with music, and then, let's go back. We got to make sure we get these notes. So it's just a different way of seeing things. Okay, so then we would fill in the individual beats. that. It's hard to read from this vantage point. The technology is really thwarting me. I'm sorry. Let me try again. So nice. So much nicer than trying to play all the notes. And then maybe we'd fill in beats 3 and 4, right? Because I just feel no tension as I'm really listening for those long phrases. My arms are just kind of like gliding through that. My fingers are picking up the notes as they go by. It feels really nice. It feels so much better than trying to go right and really play each of the notes. That's not going to get you where you want to go. So here's what I want to do, because this video is already kind of long. I am going to take a little break here. I'm going to remind you of the products that I will gladly sell you. And then there's going to be a part 2 of this video, which will be much less popular than part 1, because that's how everything works on YouTube. So we're going to transition. I'm going to remind you, you can buy Jazz Piano Fundamentals, books 1 and 2, as well as Playing Solo Jazz Piano. And this book actually does have a lot of references to some of Sophia and Abby's techniques. So if you're really loving this video, Playing Solo Jazz Piano might kind of be a fun book for you. Thank you for watching. Do stay tuned for part 2 coming up soon. Bye, everyone.